Today is Monday, February 12th, 2024. My name is Ebony Love, and I am located in Rhode Island. And I am interviewing Christopher Bruce, who is located, I believe, in Georgia. Is that correct?
Okay, Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. And Chris, can you just start by giving us, I like to start with like a grounding question. Can you give us your earliest memory?
My earliest memory, it's very interesting. I think it was in kindergarten at Alabama State University, and it was nap time, and I was trying to figure out where I was going to lay my head. And this kid took my regular spot, and me and the kid got into it. The kid was that young child was put in timeout. I wasn't. I still took my nap. So, and I got a cookie out of it. That is my earliest memory.
Did you say, would you say that you advocated for yourself to get that little nap spot?
Absolutely. I went to the teacher. I forgot the teacher's name. I was like, teacher, I've been there. I'm definitely not as eloquent as actually I probably was more eloquent back then. And told the teacher, hey, this is my spot. I've been at this spot this whole time where I've been here. There's no reason why they moved to the other spot. They moved to the other spot because they wanted to be by one of their friends. And I said, your friends can go someplace else. So, oh, that was an interesting question. It's a fun one to start off with.
Yeah, and so you started talking about this nap time, and can you remind me? Did you say Alabama? Did you say something about Alabama?
So yeah, it was part of Alabama State University. I think they had a pre-K system somehow that worked with that.
Okay, and so are you from Alabama? Were you born there?
No, I'm actually an Army brat. So I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, moved to Alabama. That's where the memory comes from. Then moved to Arizona, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and landed in Atlanta, Georgia.
And so, do you consider Atlanta your home?
Oh, absolutely. I am 100% Atlanta. I've been here for over 30 years. I am not leaving. This is home.
And which one of your parents serves in the army?
My dad retired as an Army colonel. My mom still teaches um, high school right now in Stone Mountain.
Okay, and so tell me about growing up in Atlanta. Like, why do you call it home? What about it resonates with you rather than any of the other places you have lived throughout your life?
I love this question because as someone who grew up in a very uh, mobile family, I have been living in the North, the South, the West, as well as the Midwest, so all parts of this country. Atlanta is the first place, the first city where I've seen uh, a multitude of Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black professionals, um, a very vibrant cultural scene, Black entrepreneurs, really just a open area of Black excellence from every form of life possible, arts, culture, and you can't find that anywhere else in the country. So I think that's something that's unique for Atlanta. People were saying that was DC before, and I believe it, but now I think Atlanta has it. My mayor's Black. The person who owns the grocery store down the street from me is Black. The person who does the work, police officers around me, we're all Black. Not to say that that makes everything perfect, but it's to say that it's good to know that people who have similar lifestyles like me are the ones who are also doing the work like me.
And so, with that being said, can you kind of walk me through how you went through your schooling? So, like, did you graduate high school in Atlanta?
Yes, I did. I graduated from Stevenson High School.
Okay, and when you graduated, was college something that was always on your mind?
No, it wasn't. Actually, I was a horrible student in high school. Um, It wasn't until I met my high school sweetheart who taught me how to study and do homework that I took my, I believe it was a 2.1 GPA, made a 2.99 GPA, and somehow ran it up to Hope. So I was able to go to school for free. Um, at that time, my parents were parents who would say, hey, I don't know if you're going to college. I don't know if you're going to the Army. I don't know if you're going to the Peace Corps, but you're getting out of this house. And I took that very seriously. Luckily, I took those skills in my first semester at Georgia State, made a 4.0, and continued to have excellent grades because I had the opportunities and the resources to do that. Now that I was taught how to be a good student, I said I would never fail at scholastics again. Um, so it was always an interesting story of seeing I was a class clown turning to an academic scholar throughout that time. It only just took one person to pull me to the side and say, hey, you're smarter than this.
And that one person was your high school sweetheart, or was it a teacher?
High school sweetheart, still a good friend of mine to this day.
Okay, and if you wouldn't have had that influence, do you think that you would have chosen a different path?
Absolutely. I was ready to go into the Army and serve my country. And always had that feeling of it too. However, I feel better equipped. And I'm glad I made the decision of going to college.
And that army influence comes from your dad.
Yes, it does. Going, not just my dad, but living on base, living in different areas, not to get politics involved within it, about the different campaigns or things that we've done, because there's a lot that America needs to answer for. But I truly believe that most, if not all, of the people who put on a uniform, sacrificing their lives and their family lives, should be admired. These people are doing things that are not paid as much, and putting their lives on the line for us and our freedom.
Okay. And so you go to Georgia State University, kind of like paint the picture for me. You already said that you got in your first semester, you got a 4.0. So like what was the campus environment like? What kind of activities did you engage in? Tell me a little bit about that.
But Georgia State University, now for people who don't know, for almost a decade now, Georgia State has graduated the most amount of African American college students in the nation. And I say that because it's more than any other HBCU. That includes Howard, FAMU. It actually graduates more Black people than Spelman, Clark, and Morehouse combined, which is just a few miles down the road from the university. So the environment is kind of like Atlanta. It's still a PWI. It still has a majority white population, but like Atlanta, um, there is a welcoming culture of working together to get what's best for what matters. And what matters at Georgia State are the students. When I first got there, I was confused because I've never seen so many people in my life. It's a huge use, and now it's the largest university in the state. And so many different backgrounds, so many different ways. So I was trying to find and navigate my way through it, and met some amazing people who are still my friends to this day about it. But I was very big on one, scholastics. So same thing, go to class, then do the work afterwards, immediately afterwards, then to have fun. But I was also big on volunteerism. I used to volunteer at a YMCA that wasn't too far from Georgia State. I had a great time um, playing with the young people there who just had after schools programs. And that's how I got more involved at Georgia State because unfortunately that YMCA closed down. And I used to love playing football with the young Black boys there, which kept them off of the streets and probably kept them out of trouble. So after that, I was trying to figure out other ways to get involved. And that's why I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, because they were doing the same things. They were going to the schools, helping out young Black men, as well as other people doing volunteerism, mostly manly deeds, to make sure that the community, not just Georgia State, the community as a whole, benefited from the work of these young Black men.
And so that's kind of like your life outside of the classroom. Did you have a favorite subject when you were in the classroom?
I was uniquely prepared for political science. At first, I went in as a, I think, sociology, psychology major, but it came from a professor, Dr. Naeem, in a class of about 130 or 120, one of those mega classes. And one day he told me to stay behind, and he talked to me. He said, "You know more than most adults do on this topic." He said, "Most grad students." He said, "I don't know what your future holds. Maybe it's law school, maybe it's not." But he was like, "Whatever you do, make sure you incorporate political science because you have something that no one else does." And I really took that to heart. And I changed my major to political science. And I graduated with honors from the honors program at Georgia State at that time. That's what got me into the honors program. So I don't know what it was, but again, growing up, my dad used to listen to NPR every day. So I used to read his books and briefings sometimes. I used to really be passionate about it. So I guess all that cumulative knowledge paid off in college when it was time to study and apply it.
And so, can you kind of paint a picture for somebody who might not know kind of what we're talking about? Like when you say you study political science and that was your favorite subject, can you kind of wrap around and explain how political science and your community service and your dedication to that, how those kind of connect and work together?
Yes, that's a great question, actually. So, political science is really kind of has the same definition of economics, um, the study of scarce resources. Uh, and that's what politics is about. It's about who's got what and how is it going to influence others. You'll hear different definitions from different people, but that's what it basically comes down to, especially in the experiment of America and democracy. So when it comes down to what I had said before, um, volunteering at a local YMCA or Big Brothers Big Sisters, they need funding. And that funding is not coming from private corporations. That funding is going to come from local municipalities like the city of Atlanta, or county commissioners or the state. So those different levels of government really serve and determine how successful certain areas can be. The state, county, or municipality can all give grants to that YMCA to put money into these places, and invest in youth not getting into trouble, as we see is what happens when they don't have any resources or opportunities to do. So I think that's kind of a wraparound towards it compared to, and I know it's a controversial subject, but the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, with the bill now being $109 million to build a police training facility, as compared to investing $109 million in YMCAs across the city to cut down on crime and increase public safety. That is a study in politics altogether.
And so Dr. Naeem pulls you aside after class one day and says, "You know a lot of this. How can you put it to good use after you leave this classroom?" So, what made you decide to go to law school?
Law school was based off of a decision I made when I helped out a friend. Unfortunately, he had some trumped up charges against him and was going to be expelled against from college. And he was a first time college student. So, the really good friend of mine, we tried to pull our money together to get him a lawyer, but we didn't have enough money. So I said, I'll read the handbook and I'll read um, your charges and we'll come up with a defense together. So luckily, that individual was able to graduate because he beat the charges. They allowed them to stay in school. And I said, this is one of those things that I really enjoyed, helping out my friends and my family. And that's when I determined I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to do it more to get access to justice for people who do not have the means or the resources to afford a lawyer. I would be the person to be there to give them consulting advice or anything else. I can't save the world, but I can save those that I love that are close to me. And I hope that others will do the same.
So that's one of the things that a lot of students that I talk to, or like when I read their personal statements, they all say, they're like, I want to go to law school because I want to help people. And it's something that I personally struggle with advising students on because I always say that it's not enough to just want to help people. So, like, can you kind of articulate? I think you've already done this, but I don't know if you want to expand on it. Articulate when you say, I want to help people, like, what does that help look like in practice?
Right, that can happen in several different ways with several different people. And like you said before, I often encourage people not to go to law school because when you come down to it and you ask them, really, what is it that you want to accomplish? Like specifically saying, I want to help people. Well, there's a lot of people that need help. It's just how you uniquely can help out individuals is what you really should be focused on. And law school can help you equip yourself with that, but there are other ways of doing it. 5% of lawyers are Black in the United States. We know that is a very low number considering we are about 13 to 18% of the population. However, I'll give you another alarming statistic. While there's very low amounts of lawyers out there, there are even lower amounts of Black lobbyists. So when it comes to the maternal mortality rate of Black women dying 3 times more likely to die than white women, and that's because we don't have Black women lobbying in the legislature and guiding these policies. When it comes to our education system, how it's looking like, especially in Georgia, we're going to have 21% of Black children are going to be um, illiterate. And I believe that's going to happen by 2035. We have a serious problem when it comes to education, but that goes along with the policies and the QBE formula of how schools get funded. You don't learn that stuff in law school. Normally in law school, if you want to be a lawyer, you should litigate. You should be in the courtroom. You should do the things that only lawyers can do. For me to come up with policies that deal with maternal mortality, when it deals with healthcare, education, monetary value, I can get that in with a public policy degree or getting a master's in public policy. I can get more from doing that, studying public policy than I can in law. So I always tell people, unless you want to be in a courtroom, unless you want to sue people, unless you want to do and represent people directly, do not go to law school. There is another path, a direct path for what you want to do. And a lot of people who say I want to, hold elected office and stuff, I definitely tell them don't go to law school. Um, there's other ways and other means to accomplishing the goal. I think we as a people need to invest early in people, show them what options they do have. I came up with a new thing. It's called listen, learn, and then lead. So for anything that happens in the community, we have to listen to the community first. We need to stop telling them what to do. They need to start telling us what they would like to do. Learn from it. Instead of us talking and everything else, listening and learning from what they've said that they want, do the research for them, and then lead. We can lead from behind by giving them the tools to equip to solve their own problems. So, working as a policy and advocacy director, I'm often um, shaded with people are saying there's always problems happening. Like, why are you still doing this? Because I'm trying to leave a legacy for the next generation to solve these problems. It may not be solved in my generation, but I can actually help train the next generation to get it done. My job is to put myself out of the job, and I'm going to continue to fight that way.
So I'm going to circle back to this part of the conversation a little bit later, but kind of chronologically. So you graduate from undergrad and you decided that you want to go to law school. Where did you actually go to law school?
I went to the University of Georgia School of Law, and the reason why is because I asked the professor at Georgia State to write me a recommendation, and he said I should go to a tier 4 school that was an HBCU because that would be better suited for me. And I wasn't ready for UGA law. So I asked him, I said, which law school did you go to? He said UGA law. And I was like, I will go to that law school and I will graduate as well. So it was kind of more of a petty moment, but it's also a proving moment for myself, proving to myself that I am good enough. And it doesn't matter what somebody else assesses. I can go to whatever law school and knock it out and graduate just as fine as anyone else.
And do you have any reflections on your law school experience? Like, was it good? Were there any highlights, anything like
No, it's law school. Anybody who says they enjoyed law school is either lying or they're just very weird. Law school is not fun. Now, there are some fun times getting to know some great people who are still my friends to this day. Yes, great networking as well. But no, that is 3 years of study time that I will never get back. I often ask myself, would I do that again? I don't know, honestly. So I can say there's some good times and some bad times, but doing that all day, every day, like I'm telling people, be very careful on the decision that you make to go to law school. And I know a lot of lawyers who are trying not to be lawyers anymore.
that? And what year did you graduate?
2012.
Okay, so 2012. Take me back to that year because I know that there were some things that have happened in 2012 and beyond, but kind of can you tell me what the atmosphere was like when you graduated law school?
I'll tell you a pivotal moment for me graduating law school. One was the recession. People were not hiring lawyers at that time, and they were laying off lawyers actually. So when I graduated, I took the bar. I could not find a job. In fact, I had to interview for a job, interview against 80 people. They were only going to take 8 for the Solicitor General job as a prosecutor in DeKalb County. When I say they were only going to take 8 people, they only took 8 people who they did not pay. I had to interview for a job where I was not getting paid. I was going to get sworn as a full-time prosecutor just for the experience. That's how desperate people were at that time. The other thing that happened in 2012 before I graduated was the murder of Trayvon Martin. And I was interning with the Department of Justice, and they sent me to Florida to help out with community activism. To this day, I credit that for me being a civil rights attorney and working on these social justice issues because his death touched me in a way that nothing else has. And to this day, I still lean back on those days of saying there's still so much political unrest in the nation because of the death of a innocent young black man. And I'm still fighting. Unfortunately, he was not the last one uh, to be murdered. But again, trying to work to make sure that does not happen again.
And so, unfortunately, you were not the only person who I've interviewed who has invoked Trayvon Martin's name. I've also had Jordan Davis's um, name invoked, and like this is just an aside. Before I started the job that I'm currently in, the judge that I work for in Jacksonville, his full name is Brian Jordan Davis. And so
Hmm.
it's like you think about all of the things that inspire you, especially as a black attorney, and it's different from our peers and like what they might be motivated by. And so you're coming out of, or I think it was like the depth of the recession. We might have
Right.
been coming out of it a little bit, but where did you eventually end up starting your career, and kind of how did you take that legacy from that community activism that you kind of faced with Trayvon's death? Like, where did you end up at your first job, and did that like how has that kind of shaped your the beginning of your career?
Right. And let me be clear, just because I was working for free does not mean that it wasn't a job. I was working very long hours, learning a lot about criminal prosecution and defense. But I will never forget this. It was during the vice presidential debates in 2012 where I got a phone call from a good friend of mine at law school. And she said, "Hey, Chris, there is a all white, very conservative law firm up in Lawrenceville um, that has an opening." She said, "We need some diversity." And she said, "I know you can do the job." She said, "Are you interested?" And all I said was, "Does it pay?" And she said, "Of course it pays." I was like, "Well, I'm working at a job that doesn't pay." So I interviewed there. Great people that I still keep in touch with to this day. But I worked there for 5 years as an insurance defense attorney. I was pretty good at it, especially when it came to negotiations and depositions. However, that's not why I went to law school. I went for people. I didn't go to defend insurance companies. So while I have a corporate background and did pretty well with it, I learned very fast that this was not my passion and decided on leaving there to work on political campaigns.
And how would you describe your job title now?
As policy and advocacy director of the ACLU of Georgia, it is my responsibility to set the policy agenda and advocacy agenda for the affiliate. So that goes along with the things that are happening in your state capital, your local governments. I'm the one who makes a decision on, yes, we are in favor of this piece of legislation, or no, we're not. And my job for leading our advocacy group is to get as many people involved as possible, um, letting them know that we're trying to educate, equip, and empower the community to take on these issues for themselves. So I do my best to merge the two, policy and advocacy, to do what's best for most Georgians.
And now circling back to the topic that I said we would circle back to. So you have brought up the idea of Black lobbyists. Can you explain to somebody who might not know what a lobbyist is, like what do they do and like how can you become?
Great question. I love taking this question. Lobbying is mostly regulated on the state level. So you have to check with your local state laws or anything else. In Georgia, there's a series of things, but basically, if you're paid $1,000 to influence legislators, you will be considered a lobbyist and you have to register um, with the state of Georgia. Now, people like they think you're cool because you have a badge and stuff like that. No, it comes with a lot more responsibilities and administrative paperwork. You do not need to be paid for this job or anything else to be a lobbyist. You could be a social justice lobbyist or an advocate by doing the same things that I do, of talking to legislators about how you feel about certain pieces of legislation. So, for today, as an example, I went down to the Capitol because they had Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated had a day at the Capitol, and they asked me to speak on voting matters and election issues. So I did that this morning. Then there was a bill about raising mandatory minimums on people who assaulted election workers. And while we do not want people to assault election workers at all, raising the penalties for it is not the way to do it. So coming up with other ways of saying, instead of just putting everybody in jail, how about we increase security? How about we increase education? Things that work for public safety instead of just locking people away. And then was sucked into several other meetings dealing with criminal legal reform as well. And then had another meeting with another individual to talk about litigation on certain pieces of legislation. So it's a lot of talking, mostly strategizing that goes into being a lobbyist, of knowing who's on your side, who's not, which goes back to the political science issues. If you have looked at history and the history of politics, and you can determine the who, what, when, where, and how, you can be a lobbyist. Um, as long as you have a friendly personality too. Lobbyists typically are people you want to make friends with instead of making enemies.
Something else you had said earlier that I wanted to circle back on. You had said if you want to be an elected official, you do not have to go to law school. One of the things that we see, and I don't really know the statistics off the top of my head, but I do know that a lot of elected officials do have some sort of law degree. For example, I believe that the majority of presidents, United States presidents, had a law degree. If someone did aspire to be an elected official, but they did not want to go to law school, how would you kind of advise them?
Okay, great. And it matters on what you're trying to go out for. So you want to be mayor, city council member, a state representative, a county commissioner, a state senator. All of those things are mostly on the local level. So the thing that you need to do is get involved in your local politics. So showing up to public school board meetings, showing up to board of election meetings, showing up to county commissioner meetings, whatever you want to do, you shouldn't just decide that in a silo. Actually look at the job. Somebody else has held that position before. Talk to them. Talk to them about the job, how they do it, what they see are pros and cons within it, and see actually not just the job, how they got that job. You're going to have to campaign unless you get appointed. Ask them about how campaigning is. That's one of the things that a lot of people shy away from, saying, "Oh, well, I want to be this." Well, it's not that you want to be it. People have to actually vote you in to do that. So, figuring out one, what you want to do. Two, talking to the person who's either already doing that job or someone who's adjacent to it. You don't have to talk to the state rep that you want to kick out. That might be bad. You can talk to somebody else who has that position and ask them for their opinion. But I would definitely advise them, and this is if you want to run for office or not run for office, be involved in your local community politics and the issues that go along within it. You can say, oh, I know the mayor's name. That's great. Does the mayor know you, though? So it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And that's how you get influence, not only as a lobbyist, but as an advocate.
And speaking of advocacy and speaking of yourself personally, so I'm doing a little bit of research into your background. There's two things that I wanted to ask about. So, kind of bringing this all full circle and back to your job and what you do. There was in 20, no, I don't know when this was. I don't like, I'm gonna ask you to clarify this for me. But there was a point in time where the Georgia legislature was looking at sentencing enhancements for that were targeting Black Lives Matter protesters. Can you kind of walk me through kind of the background to that story, what you did as a lobbyist, and the outcome of that lobbying effort?
Okay, and you're saying talking about criminalizing Black Lives Matter protesters?
No, it was adding sentencing enhancements that were targeting those protesters. I don't know if this. I feel like this was in 2020, but I might also be looking a little bit farther down.
So, Ebony, I'll be completely honest with you. The problem with that is it happens every year. So it's not just one occasion that this has happened. When I first became a lobbyist in 2017, there was a bill that had enhanced um, criminality towards people who may be blocking streets, roadways, or highways. So it was a misdemeanor that bumped it up to an aggravated misdemeanor. The problem with that, again, is the First Amendment. Like, and that's what everybody was going and testifying about. They were saying, well, the ACLU will sue you, or you guys are treading on our constitutional rights, which is perfectly fine and honest. However, as a lobbyist, you have to be creative. So if everybody else is making the same argument and it's not working, when I first testified, and this is one of my first testimonies ever, I went to the committee and I told the chairman, Chris Bruce from the ACLU, he said, well, a lot of people have been invoking your name. I said, yes, that's true. I'm here not to echo their sentiments, but to point it out in a different way. It's where it goes with research. I noticed that most of the members of that committee were either UGA grads or were big UGA proponents. Like they really supported the university, and it's the flagship school. So, of course. So I said, this bill right here, and everybody loves Georgia football. if you pass this bill, if the Georgia Bulldogs win a national title, there will be people in the streets. They will be blocking sidewalks. They will be blocking everything possible, celebrating a win that we haven't had in about 40 years. The sponsor of the bill was like, well, that's not the point of the bill. The point of the bill is to stop these protesters who are doing wrong in the streets. So I was like, there's nothing to distinguish between a protest and a celebration. It is the actions that need to be policed. So if you want to start locking up college students and anybody else, because I would say I would be out there. I'm a big Bulldogs fan. Be locking me up too. And I would hope that people in the committee are big Georgia fans too and believe that we will win. And it was like, oh, of course, yeah, go dogs, go dogs. Let's make this happen. So they struck the language based off of that. And they didn't strike it because it was the constitutionality of it. They didn't strike it because it was morally wrong or unjust. They struck it because of their own interests that they can identify with, of saying, oh, okay, well, if I do this, this may be a problem too. And I think that's what goes along with being a lobbyist and being strategic about things. Um, Learning what it takes to win. It's not something that you necessarily learn in law schools or anywhere else. If you want to be a lobbyist, you got to learn it from practicing and doing research within it. But all this builds up to that point.
Are there any other like big policy pushes that you've been involved in that you would like people to kind of understand how you approached it so that they can try to learn a little bit about what you do or how they could try to follow in your footsteps in the future?
Oh, yes. And feel free for people to follow me on Instagram or X at Attorney C. Bruce. It's literally Attorney CBRUCE. Because I post some of these type of things, but I'm trying to come up with another interesting example. There was a mask ban that was being proposed in the city of Atlanta. Again, one of the blackest cities in the nation with black leadership. And it was a black city council person that introduced this ordinance. Clearly violates the First Amendment, but he did it for a reason. It was dealing with crime. So it riled up a lot of community advocates who said, well, we're going to buy sweatshirts and hoodies and masks and everything else, and we're going to go protest and everything else. I said, hey, who's talked to the city council member? And everyone's like, oh, no, we just need to make sure we show up with force and everything else in the community. I was like, guys, I'll go talk to the city council member. So talking to the city council member, figuring out, listening to him, um, learning why he was dealing with this problem. He said he was going to lead on it. And I said, well, I need you to listen to me, not just unconstitutionally, but you may be making the problem even worse. And he heard me. He said, I understand. Let's go ahead and I won't bring this up anymore. We're just going to let this one die. So it wasn't yelling at each other that solved the problem. It was literally listening and coming to a common ground of saying, this is what you're trying to achieve. This is what I'm trying to achieve. Let's work together on it. And that's what was for the betterment of the community, not the betterment for others' egos or the betterment of saying, God, solve the problem, whatever else. It's for the betterment of the community altogether.
So we've kind of touched on this tangentially. So like I think you bring out a piece of like lawyering or the legal process that a lot of people don't really think about. So earlier you talked about um, go to law school if you want to be a litigator. So like go to law school if you want to be in the courtroom because that's really what law school teaches you how to do that kind of process. When we think about politics, we think about the three branches. So obviously, if you're a lawyer, you can have direct impact in the judicial branch because you're the person who's bringing a case, working up a case, taking it to appeal, putting it before the court. Um, when it comes time for the executive branch and the legislative branch, I don't think a lot of people really understand kind of how lawyers fit into that picture. But again, we've already said that you don't have to be a lawyer in order to kind of play into those roles. So if you were to advise a high school student or an undergraduate student on kind of ways that they can get their foot in the door, like whether it's internships or other opportunities where they can kind of learn behind the scenes that don't involve going to law school or getting involved in the court system, what kind of opportunities would you kind of suggest for those students to try to get involved?
Absolutely. Uh, this is where it goes with law school, anything in life. Unless you are going to create a new type of Facebook or something that's completely novel that's never been done, there's probably somebody who has a job that you want. So again, that is contacting that person with that job and learning the most you can about it. Sometimes it's better to try something and scratch it off and say, hey, I tried it, no longer interested in anymore, than it is really finding what you really do like. So for young people, especially high school students, there are high school internship programs where you will shadow lawyers to see what they do on a daily basis. Um, get a good and clear picture of it because to some people, it may be extremely boring. To others, it might be exciting. So you may want to just have an internship program with that. And it's just not them. You can talk to paralegals as well and other lawyers who tangentially deal with things. But it's really listening to yourself, trying to narrow down and learn as much about what your future is going to be about. I had no idea that I would be policy and advocacy director of the ACLU of Georgia years ago. It wasn't until I did really good work and built up a good name for myself that I was asked to do this. So, but it was because I was in the community. It was because I was volunteering on things. It was because I was very purposeful in helping out others that I received that ask. So if I'm giving you those things of, yeah, find out who else has that job that you may want. Google internship programs that deal with certain jobs and shadow people around it. But also learn more about yourself and why you do want to do those type of things. You say I'm uniquely uh, I love strategy and I love politics. So I do this on my free time because I just simply enjoy it. If there's something that you enjoy that you are uniquely better than anybody else at, then you can do things that others cannot. So I cannot emphasize that enough. And the younger that you do it, the more time that you have to master it. So again, people like me don't have to do this type of job forever.
And so to kind of wrap up, two last questions. So your earliest memory was about you fighting for your nap spot that you rightfully deserves and that you got a treat for, even after you told the other person to get out their nap spot. So coming from that earliest example of advocacy to today, what would you say that you're most proud of in your kind of tenure as an advocate from nap time to today?
Something that I'm most proud of. That is a great question. I'll just say a few things. Um, what I did do with my law degree was I did say that if people protested peacefully, that I would represent them in court. That was something that went viral. I got thousands of hits on it. Really led into my career. Um, again, going down when Trayvon Martin was killed and helping out the community. That was helpful. Being one of the only people to speak out against the domestic terrorism bill that's being used against Cop City protesters in 2017 and telling people, if you pass this bill, it's going to be used for political use. I was seen as crazy, like the world is round when everybody else thought the world was flat. Now I'm not seeming like the crazy one anymore. Um, but it's the continuous nature of fighting that I'm most proud of. Actually, teaching. I used to teach at Georgia State University for a while. And when I saw students get that concept, when people's eyes open up and like, oh, wow, that's why. That's what I'm most proud of. educating, equipping, and empowering people to learn not only more about their communities and what they can do to change them, but learning more about themselves and making themselves better.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you would like to share?
So if you want to help people, figure out where the problem is. And the problem often happens in our legislature. You don't have to be a lawyer to do this. You don't have to be even a policy person about it. You can go to another organization to say you're going to volunteer on a certain subject matter or issue. There is something that you can uniquely change in your community, in your nation, and in this world. Find it. You'll love yourself after you do it. Find out what that is and hold on to it. And there are plenty of people like myself who would be very happy to be helpful in your journey.